This is the MeatEater podcast coming at you shirtless, severely bug-bitten, and in my case, underwearless.
We hunt the MeatEater podcast.
You can't predict anything.
The MeatEater podcast is brought to you by First Light. Whether you're checking trail cams, hanging deer stands, or scouting for elk, First Light has performance apparel to support every hunter in every environment. Check it out at firstlight.com. FIRSTLITE.com. Oh, for months, all summer, all last summer, still now, I've been working on a new project that I haven't talked about before because it's a little bit, it was secrety, but it's no longer secrety. I did a new show. I'm doing a new show with History Channel, which premieres Tuesday, January 28th at 10 p.m. Eastern. Okay, so we filmed 8 one-hour standalone episodes of a new show called Hunting History with Steve and Rinella, and we dive into 8 what we call outdoor mysteries, okay? So the premiere episode has to do with details surrounding the disappearance of the skyjacker D.B. Cooper. So the only unsolved skyjacking in American history. We dive into the disappearance of D.B. Cooper. We're doing an episode on the lost colony of Roanoke. We did an episode on one that was close to home to me is that kind of blows my mind. The first ship ever built to operate on the upper Great Lakes was, if you ever heard of a dude named LaSalle, like LaSalle was the first guy to descend, the first European to descend the Mississippi down to the Gulf of Mexico. Well, LaSalle built this ship above Niagara Falls, a fur trading vessel, okay, in 1600s. That thing's missing, and what's crazy is there's still people trying to look, a competitive search of people still trying to look for and find his missing ship, which is somewhere in the Great Lakes, called the Griffin. Did an episode on that. Did an episode around first humans in North America. So check it out. Hunting History premieres on the History Channel at 10 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, January 28th. Thank you.
Cal, if someone were to ask you,
Come on,
I was just
man.
about to say the same thing.
what political office Guy Fieri holds, of what town, what would you say?
Boy, it'd be awesome if it was like health inspector.
No, what town? What town?
The contentious language was elected official.
Elected
is that
official. Elected official.
We
of
all
what
know
municipality?
It's just, I wasn't even there.
Is he a mayor?
It
He's
can't be.
He's the mayor of Flavortown.
Flavortown, nice.
If he says elected official, he has to admit that it was wrong. How many points did you win by?
1 point.
One. So yeah, it was the game.
Dude,
I said if we were to ask, what animal is the king of the jungle?
the elected king of the jungle?
I mean,
It's a bad analogy, man. It's
a
not
terrible
it's not the
analogy.
same.
what if
Turn the machine on, Phil.
Machine's on.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, now and then this happens where we start a show and there's already a conversation occurring. In the In the old days, we would just start. No one even knew when it started. Phil wasn't even born yet. Now we start it, don't we, Phil?
Yeah, that's right. I think it introduces a lot of fun energy.
When I just, hold on a minute, you're contradicting what I'm saying. What does?
I think people like when you say like turn the machine on. People have sort of an anticipation.
Yeah,
They're
like,
anticipating. They're in the middle of something.
about to
I want to
go.
hear what's going on.
Moments ago in this very studio, I wasn't there for it. There was a trivia tournament. In the trivia tournament, the host says, I don't want Randall to say it because he's like the other side of the fight. Can you do the question, Phil, just for listeners?
Let me pull it up.
So MeatEater trivia. We got a great show coming up for you today, ladies and gentlemen. MeatEater trivia that was just happening here a minute ago. This question was read.
Yes, the official wording was: rock star chef Guy Fieri is an elected government official of what municipality?
Okay. Randall says Flavortown. Okay. Everybody else has a shit fit because of the word choice. Elected.
When I think of Guy Fieri,
It's not Fieri for starters. It's Fietti. Like there's a guy named Eddie. You owe him a fee. Fietti.
Really?
Yes, that's what he says.
This is the Sicilian coming out in Steve right now.
Well,
I'm
when I
2%
think
North
of
African.
Guy, the first thing that comes to mind is his trademarked nickname, the Mayor of Flavortown.
That's his nickname?
Yeah. If you
I don't know.
if you pull up his bio on Instagram, it's the first thing that it says.
So I think a better question would have
This
been.
is Brad Brooks.
Yeah. Okay. And I was
Brad
there
Brooks,
for
our
this.
guy.
And I was.
Brad Brooks came up from Idaho to talk about this. He's something of a Guy
Yeah.
Fieri expert.
A lot of people say that about me, Steve. A better question would have been like, what is his trademark nickname that
Denotes a
denotes?
sort of
Yes.
governmental position.
But I think that would
But
have
not
been too obvious.
elected-
I
an
thought this was a
elected
fun.
office.
This was a fun question.
It's not fun
There's
for
nothing-
me.
What if you said,
No one's
what
having
a good time
mythical
with
place is a state of mind where fun and food meet in perfect harmony?
And and what position does he hold in this? Like, would you say that if you said, like, Jimmy Buffett is the elected official of what municipality? I'd be thinking, well, shit, did he get into politics? I would be thinking, oh, Margaritaville.
I mean, if he's known as the mayor of Margaritaville,
But
I
it's
think-
not an elected position. Okay,
Listen.
the Guy Fieri's downtown
it's tongue in
Flavortown.
cheek.
Fieri.
It's tongue in cheek.
Not in Montana. He is in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and a bunch of other locations. Is there some sort of election that's going on?
Mm-hmm. And was it rigged?
I think Spencer.
The incumbent? Is that the mayor of
Spencer
Dollywood?
he made a clumsy attempt to not use the word mayor in the question.
Here's where the problem comes up to me, and we'll get on with the show eventually. We're ready to just punt it. Corinne, let's just punt the episode, and we'll stay on this for 2 hours. The problem for me winds up being
Welcome,
that he
guys.
used such formal language, and if I had been in the room, I would have gotten it wrong because I would have been thinking, what the hell town is he from? And maybe he was elected.
So that's what I said to. That's
An
what I said
honorary
in the
position.
moment. I said because Spencer used important sounding words, you guys thought it was a real thing.
I thought it was like an honorary doctorate, like some town had given him like an honorary mayoral position. You know, that's what I
See,
thought.
that's clever.
And
You
that's
got it
what
wrong. What'd you write down?
Atlantic City.
Why that?
I just, can I be honest? Pulled it out of my ass. I was just like, East Coast guy.
He reached into his button. Atlantic City was in there.
Well, I initially thought Flavortown because that's the only word I associate with Guy Fieri. And then I took 10 seconds to think about it. And I thought, oh yeah, he's the mayor of Flavortown. Now
Dude,
this makes sense.
I would have had. You know that there's a sports expression about leaving it all on the field.
Yeah.
I'd have left it all on this mic if I would have been in that room.
I think everybody in the room in the moment recognized that would have been the case. And it's good that you weren't there because there was quite a stink in your absence. I'd be worried for Spencer's well-being had you been in the room and within arm's reach.
Giannis almost quit.
Yeah, he almost walked
Yeah,
out.
He almost walked out.
Wow, got that here.
When I
I
set
would have done that.
super,
Well, I would have done that with him, like a little protest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would have done that with him.
when I set super early alarms for turkey season, I name them, and often it's like Turkey Town, USA, Gobblerville, right? And so now I'm going to be like, now who would be the elected official of Gobblerville?
I always,
You know, when you're doing a protest and you walk out,
Mhm.
do you say, hell no, we will go?
I think so.
Like,
think so.
I could picture a protest where you're not going to leave. But a protest where you leave, what do you chant?
It depends on what you're leaving. Like if you're leaving an airplane that's going to take you somewhere, or a bus,
Hell no,
you know, if,
we
like,
will go.
if you march off of a vehicle that's about to move you, I think the "we won't go" still holds.
Yeah, that's true because it's leaving.
Yeah.
Brooklyn, how's business been, man? I'm starting the actual show now. Phil, if you didn't like any of that, you can start the machine now.
It's all staying in.
Okay. Brooklyn's here. The second time you've been on the show, introduce yourself, Brooklyn.
What do you want me to say?
Do you like Brooklyn or Brooke better?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Where's your new job at, though? You got a part-time job you're working down at?
The MeatEater flagship store.
Do you like working down there?
Oh, yeah.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
Do you field a lot of dumb questions when you're down there, or how do you rate the clientele?
What's the hot gossip down there?
I'm not really sure, to be honest.
She stays
A
out
lot
of
of
the
people think it's a restaurant.
Is that right?
Yeah. Like, they'll walk in.
They'll be like, I have a 5 o'clock reservation.
Well, they'll, like, walk in and they just kind of, like, stand at the front and just, like, stare. And then they'll just walk out.
Next time, go, are you ready to be seated?
I
And then just
should.
walk them back to the TV and back.
You don't try to
says-
sell them when that happens. You don't try to sell them something real quick.
No, because you just kind of, like, it happens in, like, a span of 10 seconds, if that.
So you can tell like that person didn't know what they were coming
Yeah.
into.
It's actually really
But
funny.
when you're down there, do you
MeatEater,
engage with the
restaurant.
customers?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Someone
Yeah.
was across the street and overheard a passerby saying, I bet that place has good steaks.
Mm-hmm. Depends. They do.
Mm-hmm.
So how many hours you working down there?
Just a couple days a week. I'm not sure hour-wise.
Okay. And then you're still running your school cleaning business.
Yep.
And then you've been on the show before about your school cleaning business.
Yeah.
Here you have my daughter's buck from this year.
Yep.
Impeccably clean. Can I take a look?
Yeah.
In fact, Brooklyn was set to come on the show a week ago and didn't do it
Because she's a perfectionist.
because she is perhaps too much of a perfectionist and didn't want to come down because it wasn't ready yet. It's not overboiled, I can tell you that.
Shouldn't be.
No obvious residue sticking to it. No smell.
Oh, he had a funky tooth.
I saw
Yeah.
It's not like all crumbly from getting overboiled. Beautifully bleached. You didn't bleach way the hell up the antler.
No. No, I hate doing that.
Yeah, you didn't make it that this is all crumbly and nasty. It looks perfect.
Thank you.
Are you getting much business for your school cleaning business?
Yeah, I am really busy. At
You're
the
real
moment.
busy? This is
Yeah.
the busy time of year.
Yeah, my garage is way overstuffed.
You got a lot of work.
Yeah.
Is it bad that you're here because you don't want more work, or are you always looking for more work?
Oh, I'm always looking for more.
Okay. So tell people how they come and find you to bring you a skull. You should talk about your pricing a little bit too, just so people know. Or don't you want to
Well,
get into that?
For just as deer, just standard Euro, 125, elk 165. That's just basic. Antelope is same as deer, 125.
Okay.
I'm on Instagram at 406 Boneworks. Or I think if you go to the MeatEater store, I have a few flyer down there.
I saw
My
that
number
flyer
on
in the
there.
window. I was dropping off some ammo there today and saw the flyer.
Were you?
That was a good idea.
Yeah.
And then people can send it to you.
Yeah, you can just message me and I'll tell you where to drop it off.
Yep. We're going to pass this around and we're going to do a thing. Nate that we work with that pointed out to me that 10-4 isn't a thing.
Oh.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Full-time name.
Over and
Over
out.
and out. Have you been all your whole life heard people say over and out?
Oh yeah.
You can't say over and out.
Wait, why not?
It's because you're contradicting yourself. Over means it's your turn to talk. Out means we're done. So it's sort of like saying, "What do you think, Bob? I'm out."
You can talk to yourself.
Isn't that like it's like the old like?
Now,
Yeah.
he's out of the military.
Okay.
He said, if you can make this correction and broadcast it to the world, ham radio operators and Bradley fighting vehicle people will forever thank you. You do not say over and out
You just say over.
Over.
or out.
What about in protest if you
Yeah.
Yeah, because he caught me saying over and out. He's like, over, like you're saying, like I say, what's your phone number? What's the name of your company? Brooke, over.
You say
No, you say you gotta say something. I
Boneworks.
can't see you because we're
Over.
on the radio.
Okay, 406 Boneworks.
No.
Over.
Uh-huh.
Out. Click.
Yep.
Hey, Brooke, can I say I think you should charge more for your work right here. This is like good
Well,
work.
it's not your turn to comment yet.
Oh, okay.
He didn't say over to you yet.
Anyways,
I got you.
Nate came to me and said, he also came to me today to say this. You know, I like to do 1 to 10, rate things on a 1 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
He says it's a lot better to go -5 to 5. Because a 1 sort of leaves us like, meh, right? How was the restaurant? A 1. Picture that it's a -5.
Yeah, that's good.
So he's like, don't do 1 to 10, -5 to 5. So we're going to pass this around. You're going to assess the work.
-5 to 5.
Yeah, Brad, I'd
-5
also
to
hold
5.
that comment. I have a few skulls that I plan on.
He
dropping
thinks
off
that
before
after
this
a after a respectable period of time for Randall to submit his specimens, he thinks that a price increase might be in order.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you, Brooke, about. So I was texting with you a little bit when I was like trying to boil this coyote skull, and anyway, I definitely overboiled it, and the teeth fell out, and so I've got a second one to do. I tried
glue
doing
the
it
teeth
like a
back
couple of times. Yeah, it just I don't know. So I've got a second one I can work with, but with the first one, when I was trying to clean out the nostrils, I like jammed a chopstick in there, and I probably shouldn't have done that because there's like that really cool, I don't know, what do you call it? Like filament type stuff that's delicate.
Nasal, like, what do you call them?
I just call it
Nasal bones?
nose
I don't know.
curls or nasal cavity.
Yeah, like what would you do for like a coyote? Would you like poke those out because they're so delicate, or
No, so I was actually, after my last podcast, a guy had emailed me and he did like a bobcat or something, and he told me for those smaller skulls to use a water pick because it's like a mini pressure washer.
I have one of those.
And so that's what I do on
Dental
bear
tools.
for Spencer. Actually, I just finished a muskrat, so muskrat's the smallest I've done, but it works from bear to muskrat.
What are you charging him for a
cool.
muskrat?
I can't remember
Give
because
me a
I've never
ballpark.
done.
30
I
bucks?
think it was like 40,
Yeah, good.
maybe.
Good.
Enough.
Okay, so we're going to go around the room for a score.
I'd give you a 4 out of we're the same scale, right?
-5 to 5.
Yeah, I give you a 4. Mostly,
It's the same as a 9.
yeah. And then part of that, I'll just say that like I haven't done enough taxidermy to know what a 5 would look like, but I think that's really good and really clean. The teeth aren't loose. The nasal cavity looks really in good shape. Like it's really good. But you gotta have something to work for, so you can't be perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How old are you?
Yeah. I just turned 18.
Yeah. So if you had a
You
5,
can't. You got nothing else.
meaning a 10,
Yeah.
Yeah,
what the hell would you wake up for tomorrow?
true.
Now you know what it's like
Dave?
to be one of my kids.
I'm just going to totally disagree. I think it's a 5. I think we should tell everybody it's a 5. And I agree with Brad. You should be charging more.
Okay, listen, I'm into her for 120. Well, I guess it's not going to change. You're not going to You're not going to
you're good, right?
retroactively.
I'm saying I paid like $150 or $160 for an elk in 2019, and inflation's been rampant. That's all we've heard about an entire right.
Yeah,
Like,
this is toppling administrations.
it's toppling. So you should be raising your prices by 30-40%, and you turned that around in a week. There should be an expedited rate.
The normal thing is they're like, my dad used to have a joke, I don't know what the hell it went. Like you call the guy that's fixing your shoes and it's been like 3 years. Oh, I'm just finishing them up right now.
Yeah.
However it went. But the turnaround time is amazing.
Yeah, I try to keep it. I mean, like I'm a hunter myself, and so I know, like you want your stuff back, you want your head back. That, and I don't like all of the heads stinking in my garage, so I'm gonna try and get them done as fast as I can, so they don't stink up my garage.
This
And
is
you
your
can have-
parents' garage too, right?
Mhm.
How do they think about this little business?
Eh.
They give it a negative?
Probably. They don't mind it. They kind of think it's funny. I don't know. I recently started getting into more tanning, and so I have a lot of hides, and I had all my hides stuffed in the freezer. So I recently had to buy my own freezer because I didn't like it in the freezer.
God,
So your overhead's going up. It's me, so you
Price-
got
sounds
like
to
prices
gotta go up.
Within the coming years, they will. Yeah. Everyone tells me to.
Okay.
And expedited pricing. Turn around a week. You
Yeah,
get
have
more
you
for
thought
it.
about that?
Mm-mm.
Charging for the promptness?
That's smart, Dave.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
If you said to me, let's say you stuck with current pricing, and you'd said to me like it's $125, expedited is $135. You're just like making up. Like could have been more. I'd been like, yeah, I'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to tell them that you would have done it just as fast, no matter what.
True.
Then the guy that doesn't pay for it, he's going to think, my God, imagine if I had paid for it. how fast it would have been.
Yeah.
Randall?
Yeah, I mean, I'm of mixed opinion here. My initial reaction was a 4 because I have a hard time giving a perfect score. You know, I think of these things similar to Brad. You got to always have room for improvement. But I don't know what I would do, what I would want differently if that were my deer skull. I think it looks fantastic.
He'd be like, I would have liked the antlers to get bigger.
Yeah.
What do you charge for that,
Paste
Brooke?
when you apply.
Yeah. How much does that cost?
Yeah, no, I mean, it looks great. It doesn't stink. It's clean. It's bright.
Mm-hmm.
We should all be so lucky to have a deer that looks like that.
Damn straight.
She gets a 5 from me. I know she's super detail oriented about it. Hear about it from her mom all the time. She likes picking.
Oh yeah.
What's the business called again?
406 Boneworks.
I'd call it straight 5s.
And then parentheses.
From -5 to 5.
You can add 4 and 0 and 6 and be like 11.
Parentheses, that's the top
So like,
score.
well, I'd rather send it to a place that gets all 10s. Be like, well, hold on. It started at -5.
I got a upcharge for you.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think this would revolutionize the world of European mounts. Is if you go, yeah, for a couple bucks extra, I will apply something. You'll have to figure this part out to the nose area that your dog will not chew on it. Many good Euro mounts.
Are you looking at me?
You get the sour apple spray. You get like the sour apple spray.
Yeah,
and just
you
cover
Many
it.
good animal
That's a good point.
had its face chewed off before it can be a real pretty.
And
Euro
I've told you I'm
Yeah.
sorry many times about my puppy last year, Ryan.
That's a good point. This pulls you into chemistry.
Mhm.
You can try using vinegar.
There you
That's
go.
up to you.
You'll-
It's
yeah,
your
like you
business.
said, you got to figure it out.
I
You gotta
was-
patent it.
I always
TM.
call that
Maybe.
the unintentional skull plate conversion. It's like it rolls off the bookshelf, you know, or a dog gets a hold of it. It's a skull plate now.
Dude, I had one. I had a nice whitetail hanging in a area where, like in a breezeway, and now and then you get just this insane wind. If someone opens, if the garage door's open on one end and someone
Oh.
opens the door on the other end, and that thing has more times, boom, falling down, and it now is basically like it's like
Right.
it's gotten a lot smaller.
Yeah.
And
And
just
there's-
pieces of bone. I come home, and
Yeah.
on my desk are little chunks of bone.
And there's no point in an antelope Euro mount if the nose is chewed off.
Yeah.
Like it's just
No?
not. Yeah, there's nothing.
Is
nothing
that, this
good
is what
there.
happened to yours.
I mean, this has had to have happened to your animals. Or
I
your
thought
brother's
you had. It
animals.
sounds like you guys have some
Well,
past history.
I had
that
a-
was last.
Are you still bitter about this?
No, I'm not.
You sound
It still looks
because
good.
you sound like you're upset about it. So what happened? Just to clear the air, is Ryan shot a very nice buck. I took it home. I had a new puppy, and she got into both our deer, but she chewed more of Ryan's nose than mine.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, the crazy thing is she opened the door where the skulls were, got into the secured area where they were, because, you know, obviously you wouldn't put them someplace where a puppy could get to them.
Yeah, of course.
So a very special dog, you know.
I've always said she's smart.
I
man.
remember this happening now. This is all coming back to me. I remember this happening. I remember hearing about this before.
I feel like it's a very common thing. Anyway,
yeah.
it would be a great way for you to be like, yeah, your mount's done for a couple extra bucks.
For $40, you'll dip it in like whatever the hell dogs hate.
That's what
Yep.
happened to Chili's first antelope
Yeah,
last
exactly.
year. His roommate's dog chewed it
Oh,
up.
you know what you might put on there? They make this thing for little kids. I didn't know about this. You know, if a kid winds up chewing his fingernails too much,
Oh yeah.
they make this shit you put on his fingernails, and they about vomit.
Really?
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's bad. So you tell them, I need $40 to dog proof it. Put that shit all over it. Unless
Have to
something
look into it.
tastes it, they don't know. And that dog gets his tongue on that. You got a dog?
I do.
Get a bottle of this stuff and swab his tongue with it and see what he does.
The only thing is, my dogs like throwing up. just based on the frequency with which they do it, I'm not sure that would be a huge deterrent.
Try that.
Will do. I've never heard of this.
I have a dog.
happening.
I'll put it on my own dog and I'll report back to you.
Okay.
But she just had surgery, so I'm gonna wait till she feels better. She's very depressed. She's got around with that humiliating cone on.
Gotcha.
All the things she normally does, she can't do. She thinks she's in trouble constantly.
Mm.
because like she can't do any of the fun stuff she normally
Yeah.
does. She's just totally depressed. She's probably gonna kill herself. Later, I'll hit her with that stuff. Right now, right now it'd be like too much.
Yeah.
It'd be too much. She'd jump off a dog cliff.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in. Remind people how to find you. You can stay and hang out, but remind people how to find you.
Through Instagram, 406 Boneworks, or just word of mouth, really. People have my phone number, and I don't want to put my phone number out there.
No, don't. But put it out there like this. Go like put it out there like, here's how to find me. By God, what is it?
Through Instagram.
Okay, and they do what?
Just message me. It
Okay,
should
so
come through.
message Brooke at Instagram. Find her on Instagram at
406 Boneworks.
support young business, American entrepreneurship.
Yep.
How do you say that word?
Entrepreneurship.
American
Come from
elbow
a
grease.
Real entrepreneur.
Straight
himself.
fives.
Yep.
And keep. I hope your business keeps blooming.
Yeah, for sure.
There was a thing we were going to talk about, but I kind of want to get to the main subject. Brody the other day, we were doing the live show, and we were doing our thing about where indefensible law.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you could just make a law that's totally indefensible, but it would satisfy some pet peeve. Brody was saying why he's floating. Maybe it would be illegal to catch and release fish.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to laugh about that. And then someone wrote in and says in Germany, in most parts of Germany, it is illegal to catch and release a fish. They don't want you doing it for that reason. If you catch it, eat it. I don't know if this is true. A guy named Lucas says it is.
With a K?
By God, it is
Yes,
with a
it
K.
is with a K, so you
Oh,
know
I
you can
trust
trust
him.
it.
Yeah. That's German.
All right. I want the main show. Brad, do you mind introducing yourself for real? And then Dave, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Brad Brooks, founder, CEO of a company called Argali. We're backcountry hunting gear and equipment company. For this gig, I also worked a stint in public lands too. So,
Mm-hmm. And Dave, you've been on the show probably 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, not as many as folks like Heffelfinger.
No, you've probably been on as many as Heffelfinger.
I don't know. He gives me a hard time.
Oh.
It's like he
No,
has,
you're right. You're neck and neck with Heffelfinger.
we might be.
But he writes in a lot.
But he right.
So his presence
He's more.
is
He's better about writing in.
Yeah. David Willms. I'm based in Wyoming. I work for the National Wildlife Federation now. I'm our Associate Vice President of Public Lands and also oversee our hunting, angling, advocacy work as well. And prior to that, worked for Governor of Wyoming, worked for the Attorney General's office, did work with our State Game and Fish Department. I've been an attorney for, I won't say how long enough now.
Long time.
Yeah, long time.
Since you were a child.
Feels like it.
Yeah.
I mean, look at my pictures and it looks like it too.
And of course, Dr. Randall's here and also joined by Ryan Callaghan. And we're here to discuss a subject of great importance that has been brewing in the background. Like I've been hearing about it and hearing about it and hearing about it. We keep saying we want to do something about it. I kind of thought it would go away. By now you're probably dying to what we're talking about. Who wants to dying to know what we're talking about? Who wants to take this and run with it? The high level what we're talking about.
I'll do the
Yeah.
quick overview. So
Yeah.
the quick and dirty.
What is happening?
Okay, so this would all fall under Sagebrush Rebellion, we could call it. This bubbles up about every 10 years, it seems like, but it's a movement from certain players. In this occasion, the state of Utah kicked it off with this idea that really falls back to like the federal government can't own land. The arguments they're all variations of that. And the motivation is the fact that the states want more land because they're of great economic value. So the state of Utah currently is suing the federal government over unincorporated lands that belong to the Bureau of Land Management or fall under the management of the Bureau of Land Management, about 18.5 million acres that fall in the state of Utah's borders.
18.5 million acres.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And they are suing the federal government, saying that that land
it's illegal for the BLM to control that land. And the state of Utah wants that land to basically do it as they please. And there's some versions of what that is. But they do use in their lawsuit the word divest, which means sell. So there's, basically they're going to hold the acres that are of the greatest economic importance and divest the rest, which would be sell off the rest of those public acres. And then kind of the ball of wax grows from there as far as what the implications of this lawsuit could be. But if the federal government can't maintain and own Bureau of Land Management land, what does that mean for U.S. Forest Service land, Bureau of Reclamation, and on down the line?
So the lawsuit that Utah's the state of Utah is filing a lawsuit saying BLM land is somehow they don't have the authority to own it, therefore it should belong to the states. They're focused particularly on BLM. Is this true? For now.
That's true.
Why do they feel that BLM land is fundamentally different than any other land management agency?
That's a great question. You want me to take the first?
Well, you're the lawyer here.
I'll take.
so
Yeah, okay, I'll do that.
Why are we talking about Bureau of Land Management land?
That's a great question. It's because that's what they've told us to talk about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. So here's the way I describe the case to people. First of all, the lawsuit's been filed in front of the United States Supreme Court, right? And the state of Utah's asked the United States Supreme Court to accept what they call original jurisdiction, which means in an original jurisdiction case, you bypass federal district court, federal appeals court, you go right to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court serves as the trial court.
How often is that successful?
Well, I can tell you...
To have them not defer it down court.
So I can tell you, I've been involved in a couple. The last one I was involved in was actually a case the state of Montana sued the state of Wyoming, and it was original action number 137 in the history of the country, the 137th original jurisdiction case in the history of the country. That was about 10 years ago. There have been a handful since then. It doesn't happen often. There's a high bar to accept jurisdiction. It's typically state v. state or state versus federal government, and it tends to fall on, in these instances, on issues of constitutional questions where there's immediate, massive economic harm if we don't resolve it right away, or some other really high bar.
Got like who won the presidency?
That's a pretty high bar.
Might be like a thing like we're just gonna have to take this on.
That's
now.
exactly right. Yeah. So that's the ask, right? And in it, they ask for the Supreme Court to accept jurisdiction and hear this case. And the argument is these 18.5 million acres of BLM lands, of these unappropriated lands, that it is unconstitutional. They're making a constitutional argument. They're saying it's unconstitutional for the United States to hold land in perpetuity. And this is why it's interesting to me that they focus on 18.5 million acres. Because what they fundamentally are arguing is saying, look, the United States is only able to own the land that it's expressly authorized to own under the Constitution. They cite, and I'm sorry to get super wonky, but they'll
Please
cite,
don't get as wonky as you want. Because I was just going to ask, why can't Maryland sue and take the White House?
There you go. You're asking the right question, right?
Yep.
So under Article 10, which is what states often reference, Article 10 of the Constitution is all of the powers that are not expressly articulated in the Constitution are reserved to the state.
Okay.
And what Utah says is, look, the express authority to own land, for the federal government to own land, is only found in one place, in the Enclave Clause. This is their argument. And in the Enclave Clause, the only property that the federal government can own are, and I'll just be very general, because there's a series of words, but it boils down to military installations and Washington, D.C. And so outside of those two things, the argument from Utah is the federal government cannot own any other land but those lands.
Military bases in D.C.
Yeah, effectively, right? And so then to argue that they're limiting their lawsuit to 18.5 million acres of just BLM is something that it's like mental gymnastics for me, because as the lawyer in me says, I'm looking at facts and law, right? And I'm saying, if their argument is true, and it is unconstitutional to own any lands besides military installations and Washington, D.C., then why in the world would they only be entitled to the 18.5 million acres?
Yeah, why wouldn't Wyoming make a play for Yellowstone National Park? What a windfall.
Right?
I mean, but that'd be like one chunk of public land that if they took, the state would actually make money off it.
Probably. Yeah. I mean, you'd think so, at least tourism alone, dollars alone, right? But so that's the thing I like to start off with. I'm a pretty measured guy.
Too much so.
Yeah. maybe so.
But that's why you get to keep coming back on.
Yeah, so you did go with a 5.
I did go with a 5. But it was a measured 5. It's like
it was qualified. Yeah,
it's qualified. Yeah. It's like there's room for improvement. You could charge more.
For
your services. Right? But your work is so good, it's a 5.
Yeah.
So I'm very measured. But then I look at this and say, it's not hyperbolic to say that all 640 million acres are at stake in this, of public lands in the United States are at stake in this litigation. Because if it is unconstitutional to own lands in perpetuity, then it's unconstitutional to own all lands except those expressly authorized by the Constitution, according to Utah.
Yeah, like Gettysburg. Wouldn't Gettysburg be not listed?
Yeah, I think so.
It's a
It's a national monument or
National Historic Park.
Do they give you constitutional authority to own a monument? Probably not.
No.
According
to that lawsuit.
Yeah, according to the lawsuit.
I mean, I would arargue yes.
Well, no, I'm saying if someone was literally I'm not a constitutional scholar, so I don't know if that surprises you, but if you were to look at this thing they're pointing to that says what kind of land they could own, I'm just trying to capture the extent of like sort of the bombshell you're dropping to be that not just BLM, but you could say the same thing about national parks. You could say the same thing about national monuments. You could say the same thing about whatever.
National forests,
yeah.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service lands, Bureau of Reclamation lands.
So is there in this suit, and there's a lot we got to get into here, like other states joining and all that. But in this suit, is there any articulation about why we're talking about BLM? Like, what is it about the Bureau of Land Management that to them seems like riper for exploitation than if they were going after Zion?
Does it have to do with
National Park?
Flipma?
I think it's the unincorporated line, like how the BLM came to be. Is it was kind of like all the undesignated land that was left over. So there's like a low-hanging fruit type of deal, but also Utah on BLM ground has a real history back and forth of like a lot of Bears Ears, Grand Staircase, Escalante. That is BLM land that then went into a monument status and then went back to non-monument status. And that's where you hear like a lot of that, that is public, but you can't access it.
Got it.
Type of talk.
Yeah, I mean, the national forest system as we know it was set aside as forest reserves, right? Like we've always had, the federal government has always acquired new land through purchase or military conquest, basically, right? But most of the public land system as we know it, those chunks of public land were set aside for a certain purpose. And BLM is essentially what was left over that wasn't, either reserved or disposed of. So it's sort of like the accidental.
Got it.
Historically speaking, it's sort of like accidentally the federal government's, because in theory it should have all been disposed of.
Yeah, I mean, if you were going to take the argument, like, why are we here? Like, what is there, right? It's exactly that. We had a system where, as states were originally admitted into the Union, they were required to disavow any claims to lands that were within their borders that were unappropriated lands. And at the time, we're talking in the 1700s here. We're talking at the time unappropriated, meaning lands that weren't already in private ownership. Mm-hmm. The state had to disavow claims to them, and it would go to the federal estate. And then the federal government set up a whole series of laws for how they were going to dispose of these lands. It's the way I describe it. We had things like there were laws that gave land to veterans of wars, early wars. There were, we all know about Homestead Act. There were a series of, and bequeaths to the railroad as they, to connect the east to the west. So they're actually
like the railroads were compensated
with land instead of money.
Yeah, like you get the land your tracks on, and then
checkerboard.
Everything within 20 miles, you get half of it or whatever the hell.
Yeah. So we had this system that ran for, until 1976, really. And starting in I was going to say 1891, it's really starting in more like 1876, which I think is when Yellowstone was first created. Mm-hmm. Right? That was sort of the first time that the government said, okay, not this. We're going to try and sell a bunch of stuff, but not this. And then 1891 comes the Forest Reserve Act. And Congress again says, there's a lot of economic value to this timber. We're seeing in some places unsustainable timber harvest. We need it for expansion, for home building, rail building. We're going to reserve all these timberlands. Okay, so now we start establishing the national forests. Then we roll into the early part of the century and we have the Antiquities Act, and we start seeing more monuments and parks created. And we're still having homesteading during this time. And we have the Taylor Grazing Act that comes into play to deal with how do we manage grazing on some of these lands. But you can still homestead. And then 1906 rolls around and we pass the Federal Land Planning Management Act. Right. Policy and Management Act. Yeah. Shoot.
Policy.
Thank you. I always mess it up, and I've been in this space for 20 years.
Well, you can't. Bless your heart for avoiding the acronyms.
I try to avoid the acronyms, right?
Doing a great job.
So 1976 happens, and all the land that has not been put into national parks or monuments or wilderness areas or the whole list of the things, national wildlife refuges. The federal government says they're looking at it and they're seeing there's a lot of value to these lands too. Like nobody was homesteading them. It looked like for the longest time it was viewed as sort of trash land, but they're starting to realize there's a lot of value here. There's oil and gas resources that are, pretty incredible. There's recreation resources that we're starting to see there's value to. And so they passed this law.
This uranium stuff that was pretty scary, it turns out pretty valuable.
Yeah. And so they passed this law that says once and for all, it's the policy of the federal government to keep this land in the federal estate. And it effectively ends the homesteading.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's when the Homestead Act really formally ended. It was like 1976, not that long ago.
Wow, yeah.
And you can look at that law and it matches pretty perfectly to when the Sagebrush Rebellion starts to kick off, because this argument is, no, you were always supposed to get rid of that land. You were always supposed to get rid of that land. And now you're saying it's the policy of the federal government to only get rid of it in very limited circumstances and in very small amounts if it goes through this long process. And that's not what we signed up for. You need to be getting rid of it. And so these iterations of this, as Cal was saying, these iterations of the Sagebrush Rebellion started coming around really in political cycles. It's like a sine wave, every 10 years or so.
So the logic a little bit is it was like it's last in, first out.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Can I just say though, like I want to think it's really important though to point out, like there isn't in most people's mind, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, like an open legal question about whether or not public lands are constitutional. I think there is like this assumption that some people have that like, hey, this has like been an open question and we just want to push for, some clarity on this, right? Like I don't want there to be, I don't think it's appropriate or not. I don't want to put words in your mouth here, Dave, but I want to make sure people understand though, because that what you're not saying, and tell me if I'm wrong here, is that there isn't an open legal question since FLTMA passed in 1976 about the constitutionality of BLM lands.
With one exception, and it's the exception that Utah's putting out there. So there have been a series of cases that have said, under the property clause of the Constitution, the federal government can own land, can manage it, can exclude people, can regulate, take, for example, can say this forest, we're not going to hunting on it right now. It's the stuff that's used today when there's a fire and they administratively close it. And you're like, well, can't hunt there this year, right?
Yep.
Like the Supreme Court has weighed in. There's a mountain of case law on that. What Utah is arguing is this very narrow piece. They're saying we agree with that. We're not contesting those cases. But what we're saying is that the court hasn't actually addressed the question of whether they can do that in perpetuity. The argument there, and I'm just saying what their claim is.
I know.
Right.
I'm asking you for your opinion, though.
I'll get to that.
Okay, 'cause I'm asking
just
for
wanna
your
make sure.
opinion. I want to ask you. You know what I mean?
but I want to make sure people understand what Utah's saying.
Okay, I really appreciate this because I like to hear, people should understand the argument.
Yeah.
Right,
Totally.
exactly.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
so the
Continue.
argument is, yes, the federal government has the authority to manage lands as long as it takes to dispose of them. And if it takes 30 years to dispose of them, they can manage them like any other landowner for that 30 years. This is the argument Utah effectively makes. They're just saying the Supreme Court hasn't weighed in on this very narrow issue of can they hold those lands in perpetuity?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the claim is. And I think they wrote their complaint that way because it gives them the highest likelihood that the court accepts jurisdiction. Or if they don't, because if the court doesn't accept it, Utah will probably turn around and file this case in federal district court in Utah and just go through the normal process. And they're setting it up to hopefully have the Supreme Court accept what's called cert, a petition for cert, which would be when it goes through a normal appeals process, would they accept the appeal and hear the case then? So they're setting up a what we would call a case of first impression is what they're trying to set up to increase their chances that the Supreme Court will take the case on a very narrow issue that the court has never weighed in on.
And to be clear, Utah is trying they're trying to go to the U.S. Constitution. They're trying to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. So they're not arguing. This is not necessarily about what is going on in Utah, because if the court finds in their favor, it finds in everybody's favor.
That's my argument.
Other states, every other state that has BLM land would be able to be like, well, that applies to me as well. Why would it somehow be specific to Utah?
But I say not just BLM land. This is where I keep having to dive in and say not just BLM land, all public land.
Yeah. So how if you look at it like how many acres of BLM land of like how many acres of public BLM land are in Utah? How many acres of BLM public land are in the U.S. in general? Like what's if this was to be found true, how many acres of hunting and fishing ground are at risk?
Well, so if you're just doing on BLM, I don't have the exact numbers on me. Maybe somebody else knows them off the top of their head. I think it's over 200 million acres.
Okay.
If you're talking, does it apply to all lands, federally owned lands that are not military installations or the capital? We're talking 640 million acres. We're talking about 1/3 of the land mass of the country.
My daughter's buck here.
BLM. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like it'd be like if you sold some land to your neighbor, right? And then you went, you wanted to like build a driveway or something, and you said, "Oh, I can do this because the original transaction is void." Right? And like it's ultimately, if you have to accept the argument for this part, it applies to the whole thing. Because what they're arguing is that the federal government cannot possess land.
Sure.
With these few exceptions. So it's like there's no, I mean, my understanding of it is that if the court were to find that argument compelling, there's no like safeguard. The floodgates are open, right? Like all of a sudden that would void the forest reserve system.
There's nothing in the Constitution that says...
there's nothing constitutionally different about every other type of federal public land that we know of.
Right.
What this is one of the things about this current legal push is it winds up you're shooting for the same thing as you've always shot for. This is just the latest way you're trying to do it.
I think so.
Okay, so if we let's go back to 2014, 2015. You're talking about the 10-year cycle. Let's go back 10 years. The conversation was around, and it was coming from Utah as well. The conversation was around like divestiture, or there was this like excess. How do they put it? The excess public lands?
Yeah, unincorporated.
Yeah, unappropriated is the land that they
Unappropriated.
use.
There was a push where they carved off a chunk of land that they felt was like some level of excess public lands, correct?
Yeah, the lands that hadn't been, in their eyes, set aside for some other public purpose, like a national park or a wilderness area or a national conservation area, national forest, right? The ones that didn't have that specific articulated congressional designation for a specific purpose, they're saying, well, that's what we're after. It's what's left.
That was the 2014 argument.
And it's the same one today.
Okay, so that was but no, there was a bill.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Like it was like sponsored by Jason Chaffetz, right?
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
And there was how does no one remember what the hell this was? It was like
Yeah, it was. I think it was like the Divesting Public Lands Act or something like that.
but they had
where-
a word like excess or
Yeah, they were trying to identify
Surplus.
chunks of ground that weren't all that important to the public and sell those.
yeah, and it was putting it forward as a bill
Mm-hmm.
that these would be sold. When I say that this is the same, you're driving toward the same goal, you're just taking different attitudes about it. Like, let's say I really wish, I definitely don't, but let's say I really wanted to get rid of my neighbor. And one year I try where I go back into, when he initially did his permitting. Did he make any mistakes? I'm like, okay, he didn't make any mistakes. I still want to get rid of my neighbor. I'm going to go back into his criminal record. Maybe there's something there. No. Okay. I'm going to, is he up on his taxes? Right. Meaning my goal is to get rid of the neighbor. Definitely don't want to do this. My goal is to get rid of the neighbor. I'm just going to keep trying things. Utah's been pursuing this for a long time, right?
That's right.
Is this do you feel that this approach is somehow more sound, is going to have a different result than the other ways in which they've attempted to take federal public land and make it something that they can sell and privatize?
Here's why it's different.
Okay.
They've invested, I can't remember. Brad, you know the number. It's like,
It's like 20. I know what you're going to say. It's about $20 million has been approved of taxpayer dollars, Utah taxpayer dollars, $20 million for a PR campaign to support the lawsuit.
So Utah's tax money is paying their own way toward not having their public lands?
Correct. Absolutely.
100%. Although it's a campaign that the ads are.
Talk about losing control of your tax money. Be like, I got a good idea. I'll pay my taxes. Then you take my tax money and make it that I don't have any public lands.
Yeah, although they're using kind of a rebranded "Keep It Public" campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Actually,
I mean, you're talking Washington Post ads, podcast ads. Like, they're going. It's a pretty serious PR campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
so that's one thing that's different is they're investing in this. But I argue they're not investing in a PR campaign for the litigation.
Okay.
Right. You don't need a PR The law is what the law is. You're going to run through the judicial process. Maybe you run a small PR campaign in state to convince your constituents that this is the right legal move to make.
Yep.
But like Brad said, they're running a PR campaign nationally. They're doing, like, I don't know if this is 100% true, but I got texts from friends of mine in DC during the presidential debate that said, I'm seeing ads on my phone and during the debate in my neighborhood about this. Like, it's their,
How do you sell the idea to a guy in DC? What are you telling him that he's going to care about?
well, I think you're trying to do a couple of things. It's who's in DC.
No,
Right.
I'm saying, what do you? Let's say you're in Utah,
Right.
and you get campaign money, and your cronies and things are in development and other issues, and you guys are looking at all of the land that will never be generating money for you, generating business for you, generating profits for you, generating profits for the state, and it's sitting there. If you were ever going to take a message and bring it to a guy in Illinois, what would you ever tell the guy in Illinois that would make him think, yes, I wish there wasn't a bunch of federal public land in Utah?
So I think it's the overall political message of the 10th Amendment should matter. And so who are you appealing to in DC? It's the center of power in the country.
Sure.
It's where your Senate, your House, all of the thousands of staffers that work for them live.
Yeah, like
The
John
clerks of
Roberts
the
is
court.
washing his dishes, and in the background, this ad's like subliminally.
Yeah, but not just
and then
the
later,
justices.
the court it argues in him, and he's like, by God.
Not just the justices, though. Remember, you're going to have a senator from Utah that is going to have an extreme amount of power over natural resource issues in this country, starting in January. Senator Mike Lee. I don't. When we're having this conversation, I don't know how it's going to pan out, but he's in line if he wants it to be the chair of the Senate Natural Resources Committee, Environment and Natural Resources Committee.
Okay.
So he'll have an incredible amount of power on controlling what type of legislation is heard in the Senate by the committee and what gets passed through for votes. He can hold up packages, public lands packages. He can do all sorts of things. So there's an opportunity through this campaign.
And for folks who don't know, Senator Lee has been like very prominent in what would be considered like an anti-public lands group. Like he has been
anti-federally managed public lands.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I've viewed this lawsuit as they want to win the lawsuit. Obviously, they're going down this route. If it doesn't go to the Supreme Court, they'll likely file in federal district court. Lawsuit buys you time too. Lawsuit creates uncertainty because you don't know what's going to happen in the legal process. It locks things up and creates time to address whatever your concerns might be. So there's actually, they want to win the lawsuit, but they also view this as an opportunity to get political outcomes that they want. And they know that they have people from their state that are going to be in positions of power. And now, we don't know yet what the administration is going to look like, but there might be opportunities to move legislation that could be very favorable to Utah in a new Congress. And so, you're going to run a PR campaign there to try and influence all those folks and if you have somebody from Illinois that likes the idea of local control.
Okay.
And that's the message is we don't want a big bloated federal government. This is about local control. The power of the people is best at the most local level. We can be, better managers at the most local level. And it's an opportunity to say, this is a way to deal with big government and shrink the government a little bit. And that's the other piece, I think, of this play. There's the legal play. There's the political play. You don't spend $20 million on a legal campaign. You spend $20 million on a long play that includes, changing hearts and minds in a political campaign to get outcomes as well.
Management, right, is the other one, which kind of ties in to both, but it's, who manages land better?
Yeah.
Right? And that's something that you've heard over and over and over again is, the feds don't manage that as well as the state does.
Mm-hmm.
Or everybody knows public land is not managed anywhere near as good as private land. Right? And that's something that we hear over and over again.
In terms of laying out everybody's like biases and what they're after, and you've done a good job of presenting an argument, even though you're not necessarily here to represent Utah's position.
Not necessarily.
I'm
not here.
You're not here. Period.
But
you're not here to represent their position, but you're explaining their position.
Trying to explain it.
Yeah. And I feel that, and I'll do the same on my position. Okay, because this is one of those things where I think that everybody is driving at what they find to be beneficial. There's some things that happen and it transcends. There's some things that happen in the political sphere and the social sphere where you get into these issues where there's a higher, you're arguing a higher morality. It could be like a higher Christian morality. It could be a humanitarian morality, whatever, where you step outside of you step outside of what's good for an individual, right? And you go to like what's good for sort of America, with a capital A. This, like, I don't want to present like overwhelmingly like there's a moral components, but there's also a big part of like there's a bunch of people pushing a certain thing they would like to see happen. I find that I'm totally open to the idea that federal land management and having a vast public estate and a bunch of public ground for people to recreate on, I'm open. Like, I understand it. It slows economic activity. Lots of stuff slows economic activity, right? Like having Gettysburg You could build condos and sell them for a ton of money. Having the Gettysburg Monument slows economic activity. There's things you could do with that would be more money than what they're getting out of them, right? If you divided it up and sold it as condos, it'd be more income than you get from charging people to go to Gettysburg. So we don't make all of our decisions based on what makes the most fiscal sense in the moment. By having public lands, you have places for like people to go out and be free. One of the things I like about BLM land is there's no place to be more free than you're on BLM land. You can generally do more stuff more often. You seldom get where in Southeast Alaska, deer season opens on August 1, but on Tongass National Forest land, it opens August 15th. Stuff like that doesn't usually happen on BLM land. Like BLM land is kind of like,
it's your land.
it's come one, come all, man. Like if you're worried about, can I sleep here? BLM land, probably can sleep there tonight.
Yeah.
It's a libertarian paradise.
It's a libertarian paradise. And I know that there's things you could do with it. Like you could sell it and make condos and mine it and whatever the hell. And someone's going to make some money right now. But all in all, considering that the country's going to keep existing for, hopefully thousands of more years, it'll stay like that. It'll be a place where Americans can go be Americans. And that is the thing that I believe in protecting. If you came and told me, if somehow I had the word of God that Utah would wrest control of BLM lands and not change a thing, they'd be like, no. We just want it to be that when you look at a map, it says
it's a different color. It
says Utah Bureau of Land Management, but we're still going to have it be that everybody can hunt and fish and camp and do what they want. It's just, it really means a lot to us that it says Utah on it. I think most people would be like, oh, that's cool. Not my fight. But that's not what we're talking about.
No.
No one wants it. The state doesn't want it because they want to have it be a libertarian paradise. Even libertarians a little off because libertarians would argue that you shouldn't be able to have it. So it's America's, America's playground.
America's, right? It's like the sandbox. You just go out there and
it's a place to go be American. Yeah. It's the most American place to be American. They don't want it because that's what they want to keep happening. They want it because they want to develop it. Right?
Correct. I
mean, that therein lies the issue. It's not who owns it. It's like, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, it's hard for me not to get really pissed off when I talk about this shit because, so unlike my friend Dave over here, I don't have to pretend to be friendly to the state of Utah, which I appreciate your.
I'll say other things in a little bit.
He's doing the Lord's work.
I know he is. So I appreciate.
Listen, when I hear a story about someone's like, oh, his wife is terrible, she's the worst. I'd be like, I'd have to talk to his wife. I don't know.
You got to be objective. But the thing is when you look at, a couple things I want to say, what's different between this time and last time. They realized people that don't care about public land, they don't use public land. Yeah. So the guys it's mostly guys, right? That are trying to do this, they don't do the things that we do. So there isn't a value to them for public access, for hunting, fishing, ATVing, motorcycle riding. They do not care about those things. Yeah. It's not a part of their lifestyle, so they don't care, right? But what they astutely recognized last time around, they really tried to frame this issue as a states' rights issue. Who do you hate more, the state government or the federal government? Mm-hmm. And I think if you ask that question, most people are like, or who do you trust more, state government or federal government? Most people would say, well, I trust whoever my state government more because they're closer. Sure. Federal government means to me Washington, D.C. Now, I could quibble with that and say, well, most of your land managers that actually work on this public land, they live in your state, in your communities, right? But that is I think just a common refrain from people. It's like, well, I trust the people around me more. They tried to frame this issue. This is about a states' rights issue versus a federal rights issue. It didn't take hold. And so the astute thing they're doing this time is they realize we not only need to win a lawsuit, we need to win the court of public opinion here. So let's take a bunch of taxpayer money and spend it on which I think is a smart move, on a PR campaign to explain to people why they should hate public land too. And really try and reframe this as an issue that's not about access, which is what it's about.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. And let's frame it as an issue that's really about federal government overreach, because that is a winning argument in a lot of Western states. And I understand that.
Yeah,
but that's not the issue.
No, it's definitely not the issue. It's like many other things. We were talking about this the other day. We were sitting here talking about buffalo management, bison management, elk management, and bison management. Where you're like, oh, bison, we don't want them coming into the state because they carry brucellosis. You're like, well, elk carry brucellosis. But we like those. So are we talking about brucellosis or are we not? No, we're not talking about brucellosis. We're talking about grazing lands. We're talking about fence integrity and grazing lands, but instead we're going to pretend to talk about brucellosis. I think here we're pretending to talk about like a rights issue.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is developing land.
When I want to get my 5-year-old to eat her vegetables, I'll tell her it's like, oh, I put some sugar on that, or we put some jelly on that. And she'll be like, oh, really? And I'll be like, yeah. I'm straight up lying to my kid. But that's what's going on here, right? Like they're telling you they're trying to reframe this whole issue away from the thing that they know everybody cares about, which is access. So smart move on their part to be like,
to say, oh, no. It'll all still be it'll all still be public.
It'll also be, but when you start, this is something that, you and I talked about years ago, but when you start if you really understand constitutional mandates in Western states, you know that almost every Western state has a constitutional mandate to manage state land. So if they do go to the states, right, there are constitutional mandates that require states to manage for the maximum economic return on state lands for the beneficiaries, which are the residents of the state. Okay? Constitutional mandate. Can't get out of it, even if you want to.
Yep.
So what's going to happen if states get a hold of the land? It isn't that hard to connect the dots. So I think Utah understands that they need to try and reframe this debate, and they don't want people to understand that, right? They don't want people to know that. They don't want people to think about it. So let's just talk about this in a different way. Let's talk about it as like federal government overreach. Let's talk about it. Let's say try and create this constitutional question that doesn't exist really, right? So let's like reframe this issue. And I think the other thing is like, even if they lose the lawsuit, which is very, they're very likely going to lose the lawsuit or not get granted original jurisdiction, right? Is that what it's called? Or
yeah, well, like I said, they're asking for the court to accept jurisdiction to hear the case.
Okay, so if they lose that, what's going to happen though
then they'll file in federal court and
this is a long term
climb the ladder.
Yeah.
But this is a long-term play. This isn't going away. Like
no, it's been going on since it's been going on since
1976.
It's going on, but I think this, like what I'm saying is like over the next several years, like I think this is just tip of the iceberg.
I agree.
I think this is a part of a longer term strategy here where they're like, they've got folks, they're trying to reframe this debate to make this a friendlier political issue for the people in office so that Congress can also try and take some action. I don't know what that's going to look like, but if I were their political advisor, I'd be like, hey guys, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have there are 3 powers of government here. Let's try and go after all of them and see what sticks. Okay, let's talk about Congress. Let's talk about the courts. Let's go after the presidential office, see what we can do there. Let's have a 3-pronged approach, and let's see what we can do to really stir the pot and and see what happens. So, like, I think the PR strategy is a part of a much more involved strategy. So, if I was betting money right now, I'd say even if they lose the lawsuit, like we're going to keep seeing different things happening that are going to be poking around the edges of the public land system in different ways to see what they can get away with.
Well, and what I'm saying is the lawsuit's going to be out there for years.
Yes, absolutely.
The lawsuit is what creates the space for all of that other stuff. Like what I said before, creates that uncertainty, so makes people maybe willing to agree to things that they maybe wouldn't have otherwise agreed to, because you have somebody like Justice Gorsuch, for example, whose mother was the EPA administrator under the Reagan administration, was a huge part of the Sagebrush Rebellion, right? And they're looking at the makeup of the Supreme Court and saying, we have a puncher's chance if it gets there. Right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to...
That's where the politicos say they may have a puncher's chance if it gets there. And so that's where the PR comes in as well, to try and squeeze out some... Even if the end result isn't a transfer or wholesale transfer or sale of public lands, it might be overhauling how we manage public lands.
Sure.
And that's when I look at the lawsuit, I think there's 2 things that are striking to me. One is what we talked about earlier, how it's sort of the most explosive approach that they've tried, because if they win there, the barn doors are open, right? Like it means the federal government can't legitimately own land if the court finds in its favor. I mean, the other thing about it that's striking is it's a very narrow question that has to do with textualism. And if the current composition of the Supreme Court looks at the clause about military installations in Washington, D.C., to me, it's not an open and shut case that they're going to toss it out. I'm admittedly just an amateur legal scholar here, but like what they're asking them to do is say, hey, look at the Constitution. It doesn't say anything about federal public lands. In fact, the Constitution says the federal government can only own these types of lands. Ergo, all this stuff needs to go away. And when I think about it, I'm like, I don't know. Is that so far-fetched to think that if they do, if the Supreme Court grants cert, that the Supreme Court's going to throw it out? That to me seems like wishful thinking.
I don't know how to phrase. Like, I think it's a legal stretch, right? But
yeah, do you mind getting into the plausibility of it?
Well, okay, I don't think
ahead.
we've introduced the fact that Utah started the lawsuit, and now a bunch of other states have jumped onto this. So everybody needs to be aware of. That's again why we're talking about this, right? There's a bunch of eastern states, and
the hell they got? What do they have? They need to do with them.
I don't understand what the deal is, but
they want Gettysburg.
Yeah, exactly. But out here in the West, Idaho and Wyoming, Wyoming's kind of hilarious to me in a lot of ways because you can't even camp on Wyoming state lands.
Nope.
And they're like, we want our chunky Yellowstone National Park, we want Tetons, we want wilderness areas as state lands.
Yeah, there's
It's
stuff
like,
in this state.
Interesting.
There's restrictions on state lands about camping. If you want to trap on state lands, you got to go try to get some special permit to do it. You got to put signs up telling everybody that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Can you imagine, dude?
And in this state, we have a current plan paid for by the taxpayers of Montana that has already analyzed state lands for sale. That just came out a couple months ago. So,
well, the thing too that is, so again, back to the constitutional mandates in Western states. The other thing that's interesting about most state governments is you're not allowed to deficit spend, right?
Nope.
So you're not allowed to. So you have to run. So federal government can deficit spend if they want to. States can't. We had a real bad fire year this year. This is something that gets brought up a lot, right? So I think it was like $3 billion were spent of federal dollars fighting wildfires this year.
oh yeah, $50 million fire is very common.
Very common, right? So like if you're a state and you have a catastrophic wildfire year, which you can't forecast or foresee, you just have to deal with it when it's happening.
I'm forecasting right now. There will be more. There will be more of those.
I'm gonna write that down, Steve. I'll take that bet. No, but like you're gonna. What are you gonna do? You're gonna tax your citizens, raise property taxes, raise sales tax. You got to raise revenue. And last time I checked, like people aren't wild about their property taxes going up, or sales tax, or any other tax. So you're gonna look around at your assets you can liquidate. First thing you're gonna look to is like, what the hell can we sell around here? You know, if I was like going broke, I'd start looking around my house. I wouldn't sell my kids, but I'd start looking at the furniture, whatever else I had. I would pets, absolutely.
Yeah.
But my guns and bows would go last. But like, you know, you start looking at what you got to sell, and if what you have is a bunch of valuable real estate, like for sure you're going to sell it. And that's and there is a long history of every state in this country selling lots of public land. Utah has sold more than 54% of its state lands. More than half of what it was given to statehood.
So
has been
You know how you
sold.
can really make this strike home? If you're one of our many listeners in Texas, I want you to ask yourself, how much public land access do you enjoy in Texas? If you go like, geez, that's a great question. I don't think I've ever been on much public land in Texas. It's because it was sold. All
So
of
the Utah deal, just because they are pretty tidy numbers, they got right around $2 billion for the state lands that they sold. They did some trading with the feds, and got some coal claims and got a $50 million check, but it all comes down to a little over $2 billion for their little over 4 million acres of state land that they've already sold, which is about $500 an acre. Now, the recreation economy in Utah is about somewhere between like $8 and $9 billion a year, which is recreating on federally managed public ground by and large. I don't think, every time I've had this argument in the past with folks that really want to make this happen, it is akin to having an argument with like an animal rights activist, where it comes down to, well, because it's ours, we should have it.
Yeah.
And we're like, you want to go down the economic path? Let's talk about the economic path. You want to go down the management path? Let's talk about the management path. There's not a good argument. And it always comes down to, well, it's ours because we want it. And it's ridiculous. And like we've said before, it often, you're having that argument with people who think they have all these silver bullets about how poorly the forests are managed and all the things, but they cannot say it properly because they don't go out and use them. They're not on the landscape.
Yeah.
They are the super removed entity making these big decisions, which is oddly enough the argument that they use to try to steal the public land.
Mm-hmm.
And it's happening again, and people need to plug in. I think a huge issue that we have is people don't know how to contextualize 640 million acres. You can't hunt and fish on all 640 million acres of federally managed lands because of national parks, parts of refuges. There's infrastructure there. There's buildings and bathrooms and all the things. So it's not 640 million acres. We have, 359 national parks, I think, of which you can hunt on at least a portion of 59 of those national parks. But there's more privately owned acres in the United States set aside for private wildlife enjoyment than in the entire national park system. So when we talk about, 640 million acres, that's a lot. Think about the national parks right now. Think about Western national parks where there's reservation systems and overcrowding, and then think about just removing a handful of those.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's not to contradict that, but you could be like, well, how many kids? There's 100 million kids in the U.S. Who cares about 20 of them? Like, well, the parents of those 20. So it's like, it doesn't need to be, when people start losing access to the place that where they hunt and fish and their grandpa hunted and fish and their, generation hunted and fish, that part matters to them. And that part is going to inevitably get rolled up into this stuff.
And it is inevitably going to be worth more and more and more and more. And, Teddy Roosevelt knew that. He saw all the things that we see today just at an earlier time. And he said over and over again, we are not managing these lands for us. We're managing these lands for the generations to come. And we need to make sure that the things that we enjoy today are here for those generations. And in large part, it was because if people don't get to see them get some understanding, then they will be sold off. And I think all of us need to figure out, and when Trump was running for office the first time, we have him on record twice with different hunting publications, because just like this election,
I sat in a room and listened to him say it.
Yeah.
He said, quote, I'm not going to sell off your public lands.
Yes. Yep.
2015, Las Vegas, Nevada.
Yeah, man.
January 2016.
And
January 2016 is Las Vegas.
It's because the sportsman's vote was important then. It's important right now. But man, these groups are funded really well, and they can take this public lands message that was very, very effective back then and twist it right now to where people say the thing But in Utah, they're like, yes, we got them, because what we're talking about is state management of those lands and sale of a lot of those lands. And again, $500 an acre for the millions of acres that they've already sold. Like, if you can get $500 an acre for anything, you buy it right now.
I was going to say,
No
can I
kidding.
buy a bunch of this?
You might be able to actually just hold on just a little bit.
Give it
There's-
9 months.
Well, there's something I need to do here, because when I hear about the loss of public access, however it happens, okay, I have like an emotional, visceral reaction where I do not want to see my hunting and fishing brethren lose access to the places they like to hunt and fish. Okay. But I also don't want to be hyperbolic here. So I want to like narrow in on, focus on a point we've been raising as a sort of hypothetical, and why. And I'm trying to ask you, this is to you, Dave. I'm trying to ask you, like, is this question about BLM land somehow being different? If I was sitting here talking to the architect of this suit, would that individual, and we're not, so I'm just holding you to the fire here.
Mm-hmm.
Would that individual say, no, this would not extend to national forest. This would not extend to Indian reservations. This would not extend to refuges. This would not extend to national parks, because there's something distinct about BLM, right? Would they tell me that? Or is it really that if the Supreme Court says the BLM can't exist, like they can't hold land, is it really logical that someone would then say, okay, I'll see you next Monday because we're going to talk about national forest land?
Yeah, let me unpack that just a little bit. I don't believe it's hyperbolic.
Okay.
I'm not a guy that does a lot of hyperbole.
No. That's
Never.
my problem with you.
I know, right? You need more of it from me. I tend to be a pragmatist.
Me and Corinne are like, yeah, let's get who's the one guy, the real measured guy who tries to be real fair all the time? And give like really solid information.
We
What's
bring
his
you
name?
in for the
Dave
hot
Wilms?
takes.
Yeah. But
Hot takes from Dave Wilms. It depends.
but this is why I say this. I'm not a guy that's
you.
usually very hyperbolic. I'm mentally flipping you off right now. But I'm not very hyperbolic.
Yeah.
But I look at this and say, one, yes, they would absolutely come in here and say this only applies to the 18.5 million acres they apply to. In their own complaint, they say it only applies to these because they're these unappropriated lands. And they say these other lands have been appropriated through acts of Congress, so we're not
Okay.
asking for those.
Got it.
So they'd tell you that. I'm telling you, when I read that, if it's unconstitutional to own lands in perpetuity that aren't specifically enumerated in the Constitution, then that would mean it's that Congress can't come in and pass a law that says we're going to create a national park and all of a sudden it's constitutional to own that.
Yeah. The same way they couldn't tomorrow, without doing a constitutional amendment, they couldn't vote to ban certain constitutional rights.
Right.
Like
So-
if the Democrats took control of the House and Senate and presidency, they couldn't say it's illegal to own a gun.
Right.
It's a whole other battle.
Right.
Right.
So I'm looking at it and saying public lands, all of them are at risk with this lawsuit, regardless of what Utah tells you, what their lawyers might tell you, and regardless of what they wrote in their complaint, regardless what their PR campaign says. And I come out at this and I say, and this is to build off of something Brad said earlier as well, they're running this PR campaign that's saying, your land's not going anywhere. We're just going to manage it, and you're going to have all this access. But if you actually read the complaint that they filed with the Supreme Court, and you look into what they allege the harm is, what's the harm they're suffering? Why?
It's got to be economic.
Yeah, but what is the economic harm? The things they raise are, we can't tax that land and we can't use eminent domain on that land to move transmission lines or roads or other infrastructure because it's federally owned. And my retort to that is, well, if it were transferred to you, you wouldn't be able to tax, you're not going to tax yourself. And you wouldn't need to use eminent
The
domain.
state doesn't pay itself for its own holdings.
Right? You wouldn't need to use eminent domain to run transmission lines across state land. You'd just do it. The only reason you'd need those authorities is if your intent in the end is to sell it. And just because you have an administration right now and a law in place in Utah right now that says we're not going to sell it, and here's how we're going to manage it, doesn't mean that this transfer happens and a new administration comes in or the politics in Utah change and they just change the law, the state statute, and then say it's the priority of us to make as much money off of this land as possible, and we're going to turn around and sell it.
This gets to the thing about when you're talking about something that you're not actually talking about. And it's got to, I think that like anyone that's being intellectually honest, and if we had someone in who's the architect of this lawsuit, if they were being intellectually honest, they would have to admit that this is about divestiture and sale and development.
Even one of the other, so there were amicus briefs filed, right? 13 additional states through either their attorney general, governor, or legislature filed amicus in support of Utah saying, take the case. In one of them, there was a footnote in one of the briefs that said that I'll just paraphrase. We think we want national parks too. Right?
That was Wyoming, right?
Yeah, that's right. The legislature.
God, what a gold mine, man.
Oh yeah.
To hit if Wyoming picked up Yellowstone, dude. Because think about it, you could do like, if you did condo stuff and you did 100-year leases even on condos, I mean, you could develop gold. You could develop Yellowstone National Park and just make gold. I mean, literally, because you could mine a lot of minerals, do big developments, put in ski hills.
But the size.
Imagine if you could buy your own hot spring and shit.
The other.
What a gold mine.
The crazy thing too is
I'd want it too.
I
do want it.
If the state of Wyoming had to manage Yellowstone tomorrow, like body for body, dollar for dollar, what the federal government does, I mean, to double state government.
If you went and found, if you went and found whatever hosers ran Big Sky, okay, whatever people originally put Big Sky together and like did a bunch of land swaps, got this hill, Yellowstone Club, all this bullshit, right? Golf courses all over the place. If you went and got that crew and you said, listen, man, we just got possession of Yellowstone National Park. What do you boys have in mind? They're going to come up with a plan. They're going to come up with a plan that makes a little jingle.
Everywhere.
Yeah, hot water slides. Hot water slides.
Could you imagine the water slides?
So when parents got to get on the water slide with their kid, they're not, the whole line as they climb that ladder, they're not being like, oh, it's going to be so cold. I know that feeling. You get up there and it's hot water coming down that slide.
You know, on the plus side, my dream trip has always been to backpack into or horsepack into the thoroughfare and then pack raft Thoroughfare Creek down into Yellowstone Lake, but that's illegal because you can't be have a flotation device on, a raft or anything like that on rivers or streams in Yellowstone. So maybe if the state took it over, I could actually fulfill my dream.
Yeah.
So now
there's a pro argument. You heard it here first. Yeah.
You're not necessarily supporting this argument, but
no, it's a gold mine. It's a gold mine.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to hunt it for a minute?
Well, I mean, that's one of the things that kills me right now, man. I feel like it's somebody's like trying to sell you a car.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, what about the warranty? They're like, oh, don't worry about that. There will be one.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, well,
the manager's drawing it up in the back right now.
How are the tires in good shape? Oh yeah, it's got tires. Okay, well, what kind of gas mileage? Oh, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
You know, and you're like,
so you're sure everything's good, right?
Yeah. Should I be buying this car? And because it's not a who manages it best argument. It's not a, I mean, all it is again is just coming down to we want it because we want it and we're going to make a bunch of money off of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's all there is to it. And, you know, it was hard to talk about this stuff during the election cycle because people were so charged up and they're like, oh God, if you're voting for public lands, you can't have your Second Amendment rights or you're voting for transvestites or you're voting for this. And, you know, and it's like, no. If you stop and think about it right now, you have your guns and you have public lands and access to them. All good.
How did that happen?
How did that happen? It's because we demanded to have it, right? And that's exactly what we need to keep doing. And unfortunately, like, I swear to God, every 10 years, we need to re-educate everybody and say, no. You have got to stand up and make a big stink about this. It is absolutely not a real thing, that you have to give up rights over here in order to have access to public ground. I mean, if you guys remember the monuments rescinding fight and all the jack wagons coming out, I think it was like Sean Hannity, right? It was like, monuments in Utah, you can't physically touch them. Right? And people were like, you can't even walk on them. There it is. Sean Hannity, wherever the hell he lives.
Where
and
does he
people in
live?
Utah,
New
God
York.
knows what,
Oh, New
right?
York.
You're like, what are you talking about?
Get his loafers. He get his loafers all dirty.
Yeah, Christ Almighty, yeah. I mean, it's so bizarre. It's like, we just had this great talk with Field and Stream Australia, which is like kind of akin to like a Delta Waterfowl or Ducks Unlimited group, and talking with those guys, it's like a dystopian future of what the U.S. could be, where there's protesters out in the marsh stealing your ducks before they hit the water, trying to flare birds, and really aggressive gun laws, and they have this whole experience that we could learn a lot from. And for years, they've been telling folks in the U.S., and they were very, very interested in the banning mountain lion fight, and they're interested in this public lands argument that's coming up again, because they're like, well, boy, once the hunters went away, there was nobody telling people that that marsh was of value, and now that marsh is ag land. And so now that we've actually gotten better regulations for duck hunters, and now it's not a future in question for at least the next couple of years, there's no duck hunters coming back because the marsh is gone in this part of Victoria.
Yeah.
And, it's like firearm possession has gone way, way down, because people are like, well, why do I need firearms when people are out there harassing me when I try to go hunt? Like, it's all out there, and it's an amazing, horrifying tale. But it's like, when you see this stuff, you see the mountain lion bans, you see this argument that, people will literally email me and be like, you just don't even have a clue of how many public acres there are. That's the issue. I'm like, no, I do. And it's not that much. Like, do the math in the United States. Like, we're hanging on to a very small amount.
What do you think would happen? This is something I've been thinking about with this, is like, if one of the things we all hear a lot about is like just hunter crowding, right? Too many people in the field. People get frustrated by it everywhere you go. And I'm talking about in the West in particular.
Sure, yeah.
But part of the reason that there are so many people hunting is because, well, people want to do it, and there's a lot of tags available in a lot of Western states. What do you think would happen with just the amount of tags available, like opportunity to hunt? Let's talk, like, forget access, right? What do you think would happen with like tag availability? I'm asking an honest question.
I have
like,
no idea.
I don't
I don't know
either.
what the implications would be.
Well, like if
Would the tags become unlimited and good luck finding access?
that's what I'm saying,
Or
right?
you get more fragmentation and development, and animal numbers drop and tags drop.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think about what is the potential opportunity loss for hunting in an already like finite environment where people are frustrated. Like, what is that going to look like under this scenario?
Can I also point out one legal piece that we haven't talked about? We've made some assumptions here. We're talking as if the result of this would be that land would be transferred to Utah and then they would sell it, because that's what they've asked for, and we presume that the court would give them what they ask for. In their complaint, they say dispose of lands in accordance with state law, and I frequently have to remind people that the federal courts are applying federal law and the United States Constitution, and that if they side with Utah, they actually would have to dispose of the lands in accordance with federal law, not state law. And that could mean it's the federal government selling the lands, and Utah may not be the high bidder. Like right now, the process that's laid out in FLTMA is for sale of lands is you have a bidding process, and you have to sell them for the fair market value of the land, but there's a bidding process. maybe they're not the high bidder. Maybe we wind up having to go to the Elon Musk Arches Park. I mean, it's like that's a piece that we're not
The
talking
architects
about.
of this would be like, Dad,
We didn't think of that. Yeah, I mean, because the state of Utah is not entitled to those lands legally.
They're trying to make the argument that
Right,
they are,
yeah.
but they, in their own constitution, as a condition of statehood, which every Western state, and like I have a spreadsheet of all the states with this. Almost every state, as a condition of statehood, had to give up all claims to, and they use the term unappropriated lands in these constitutional provisions. But unappropriated lands at the time meant non-privately held lands. So they had to give up claims to those as a condition of admission to the Union. So they don't have a legal claim. They forever gave up their legal claim to those lands. They're trying to say there's this constitutional loophole, I guess. Like, we've always interpreted this constitution wrong, and so the lands, the federal government can't own them, and so by default they should come to us.
And that's why
They give
a
up all
giant
claims to
mining
those.
firm from Australia owns southern Utah.
And
Kids.
And that's the risk. I had somebody write to me recently and said, one of the big risks with this case is just that. You have a lot of people that are concerned about foreign governments buying up land in the United States. And what's going to happen if Utah wins this and the result isn't the transfer of the land to the state, the result is the federal government has to sell those lands? Who's going to buy them? And it could be foreign governments. We don't know who's going to buy them. Maybe Utah buys it. Maybe California buys all this land in Utah.
honestly, though, they didn't go to
they buy
they didn't go
buy
to
the
the Supreme
water.
Court. They'd be like, I just want to undo all of the stuff I just did.
There's a hot take for you.
Right? Yeah. I mean, water rights, right? They just buy
they're
up
like,
the Colorado
dude, I never
River
thought
Basin.
that California would buy it.
Yeah.
I don't think that if I can speculate about what success looks like for these guys, I don't think they care if. I mean, it would be great if you're the guys in the state of Utah. You're like, ideal scenario, best case scenario, we get the land, we get to sell it, make some money, right? We're happy. But I don't think they really care. I think
Because it would generate the kind of economic activity they're looking for.
That
which is,
philosophically,
like, right now,
that they agree with philosophically, which is like there's a philosophical problem they seem to have with the idea of public land when you come down to the intent of it. So like
if a bunch of Big Sky guys had it, they'd be glad.
They could
I
tax
think they'd be
it.
happy.
Yeah.
They could tax
it. Yeah. If the Chinese government bought it, like I don't know if they'd be happy or
It'd be
not.
bittersweet.
They'd still be able to tax it.
They'd still tax it. Yeah.
Cal bring up a really good point. And I'm going to verge into ground. I'm going to verge very briefly into territory that I don't like to on this podcast. But Cal made a point about talking about this after the election. Like I'm speaking I'm not speaking for anybody in the room but me, but I'm speaking very personally. After the election, there was so many areas I was happy about. Like I was very happy about border security. I was very happy about crime. I was very happy about free speech issues. I could go on and on and on of stuff that I was elated about. But part of my head was like, you know what, though? This ain't going to be good for public land. And I think that voters and like Americans, voters, whoever, have to realize no political party is ever gonna do everything you wish it did. You will always make a compromise. And if anyone thinks deep, when a political party gets together and they have a convention and they lay out their the planks in their platform, you will never find representation of all of your ideals and all of your dreams within two political parties in this country. They decide the agenda. It's never going to be that they all line up. And you do not need to sit and think that I have to support everything the party says.
Apparently, you haven't read the 1836 Whig Party platform. Gives me warm fuzzies.
I'm
just joking. I don't know
that's a great. No, it's a great joke. I was trying to do an impassioned speech.
You ruined it.
Great joke though. You have to you just look and admit no party will represent all of your interests. So if you get the party you want, there's still work after the fact to go okay, now I need to make micro adjustments. Like, I got who I want. Like, I have who I want in the White House. I have who I want in the Senate, whatever. But these people that I support, I'm talking about whoever's out there, these people I support have to ease off this issue. Because this is not representing me. It's not representing other constituent members. And I remember we went through this. We went through this 10 years ago. I remember all these surveys of what % of hunters in Utah hunt on public land. What % of Montanans hunt on public land? What % of people in Wyoming hunt on public land? Want to be like 68% of hunters or something like that. Like in this day, I think it was like 68 or 70% of hunters hunt on public land. And
Mm-hmm.
hunters, like, this is not like a rule, but it's generally true. Hunters generally vote Republican. We need to convince them to not go down this path.
I don't think the hunters need convincing.
No.
Right?
Hunters
You're talking the politicians, right?
Hunters need to say, like, listen, man, I got you. Border security, I'm with you. The whole list of things, I'm with you. But listen, this public lands thing, this is not for us.
It shouldn't be a political issue at all. And
Everything's political.
But the polling data suggests it's really not
I got
for
you,
public
yeah.
lands. Like support of public lands is it's like nonpartisan.
That's
like
why
everybody supports it.
That's why it's become a word. It's a little bit. Years ago, we went to Rob Bishop's office in Utah and had a conversation on this podcast with Rob Bishop, and very respectful. He was great. Okay, it was a very respectful conversation about some things we don't agree on. I would do it again with his current counterpart. And it was funny because everyone likes the word access, right? We sort of agree, like we like just like conservation. Like, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
Everybody's like, are you for conservation? No politician in America is going to say, no, I hate conservation. Everybody's like, yeah, because I know what I mean when I say it. And then it's not what you mean when you say it, but when I say it, I know what I mean. And Rob Bishop kept talking about access. And you think he means like increasing, like that there'd be more land for the public to use. What he means is basically, access for semi-trucks.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Or whatever.
RVs.
I put words in his mouth, but like when he says, like, everyone's like, I'm pro-access. Oh, me too. What kind of access in particular? Well, here's what I'm talking about. What are you talking about? I mean, like that you can drive your truck more places. Everyone likes access, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think he used recreational vehicles. Like if you can't drive that up there and hook it up,
yep.
that's not access to me.
So you get these words that get squishy, and I think it's like after that big public land shootout from 10 years ago, most politicians are like, man, okay, there's one lesson I learned here. Do not get labeled an anti-public lands person. So it hasn't changed what you're after, but you're like, okay, so from now on, rhetorically, I have to be more careful.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I have to say, this is for public lands, meaning for me. I'm pro-public lands for me. Right? And people are like, oh yeah, he's pro-public lands. He said so.
It's like
he wants some too.
But I think to your earlier point about like the election is not, it doesn't end there, right? Like this is where conservation groups especially are very effective because like they're getting ready to work with the new administration. And like there's multiple ways that you can apply pressure to decision makers. And there's one way, like in the last big cycle, I mean, there's this huge public outcry, right? And like you saw rallies and you saw people taking their shots at Jason Chaffetz. But I think too, like this is where the rubber meets the road in terms of like having policy groups lean in and have conversations with decision makers and try to get them to see all the different sides of the issue. So, it's like you can't ever sort of step back from the policymaking process for 4 years as an engaged hunter or angler, right? You got to support the groups that are working on your behalf. You got to talk to your lawmakers when you have a chance. Because like we're all sort of enjoying the no more marketing calls from campaign offices.
I know.
My mailbox hasn't seen a flyer in days. It's fantastic. Just bills and credit
Good
card
stuff.
bills. Yeah. But like we're just now getting started on this stuff, like in terms of as a country, like the road is way far ahead of us, even though we feel like we can kind of get a break from politics.
Yeah.
And as we've been seeing it on our TVs for the past year.
I read all through the campaign, like I read voraciously, like I follow it as an American. I follow it as someone who's just like, I'm just interested in politics. Maybe I missed it. I don't think that this issue came up.
It came up in a way.
Did it? Tell me.
Housing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how the Montana deal went.
Yeah. So it came up in the context of we need more housing in this country. And it actually came up in one of I think it was in the presidential debate even, of there are all these public lands out there that, and I can't remember the exact way it was phrased, but it was like, they're not being used for anything right now. We should be using them to address the nation's housing crisis. And you can see in Utah places maybe like the Wasatch Front where there's a lot of overcrowding starting to occur. You could, in the Las Vegas area is another great example where you're going to see pushes for using public lands, and it could be bipartisan, for housing.
Yeah.
And we have to have a serious conversation about are there
if the
places
Democrats
where it makes
win,
sense
it'll
or
be
not?
thousands of tiny homes. If the Republicans win, it'll be 8 really big homes.
But the feds worked with the state of Nevada, and they did give up some BLM land there in Vegas. So it's not like
There's a process.
there is a process,
And
right?
it does happen occasionally.
Yeah.
And that's something that, frankly, this is what Congress exists for. I mean, there have been plenty of, to your point, Nevada bills that protected public land and gave land specifically to be sold for development around Vegas. I don't know if you guys remember Harry Reid.
Yeah.
Yeah, Harry Reid, back when he was in charge of Senate, like he was the unofficial king of doing these big land deals. So the point is, like, there's a process. If there are legitimate issues like housing crisis or whatever, like there are ways you can go about addressing those issues in a reasonable way. I just want to say one thing that you said, Steve, which I think is really important. I think too often people assume that whoever they support politically is like they're going to represent my 100% of what I believe 100% of the time, and I can just check out after I voted.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people, especially on this issue, like if you hunt and fish, if you like to ride dirt bikes, whatever you like to do on public land, park your ATV or your RV or whatever, like you really do need to pay attention to this issue because it's not going away. And like I said, I think one of the really annoying things to me is when I look at the people that are behind this, I've never seen one of them holding a gun out on public land. Maybe they do. Like, remember that photo of Jason Chaffetz?
Yeah, that
His
was
wiener
very
dog.
natural.
Very natural looking with his wiener dog.
Yeah. No,
You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't think they don't do the things that we do.
Sure.
They don't understand. And so, like, help them understand. It's an opportunity. They may not want to understand, but make them understand. That's our job. That's your job. They work for us.
Yeah,
Don't forget that.
if you're sitting at home thinking like, how could I ever, go against, or how could I ever like go against some aspect of the political party I'm involved in? Ask yourself this: when you read about when a campaign's going on, and you read about those $1 million a plate dinners, every one of those people going to those dinners is saying, when they get their chance, they're saying, we could really use some help on it.
Yeah.
Every one of them. It's a caveat, or it's conditional.
Yeah, I just got
It's,
this one thing.
I could really use some help.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I went to a dinner one time, and I was sitting next. I had dinner, and I was sitting with a senator from Wyoming, and he was being awarded a prize for having really done this kind of like very like esoteric sort of legal maneuver, which helped the bison meat industry. Okay. And they were honoring him at the dinner because they had this like economic they had this annoyance, this sort of like regulatory annoyance. Okay. And they were thanking him for the help on this regulatory annoyance. He didn't campaign on that. He might not have been aware of, but people come and say, I love you, man. I love you. Here's some money. I could really use some help on whatever. There's nothing wrong with going to your party that you voted for. Your representatives you voted for. And says, man, most everything you're talking about is great, man. We could really use some help on this public lands issue because we hunt that shit.
Oh, absolutely. You can go to the party that you didn't vote for too. And be like, you know what? Hey, I got to be honest. I didn't vote for you on this. Here's part of what you do that I do agree with. Get on board with this, and you might have my vote in 4 years or whenever that term's up. Like, there's nothing that says you have to vote for the person to go visit their office. There's no prerequisite.
And money doesn't. You don't have to donate either.
No.
I want to make sure, like,
Certainly
money.
helps.
Maybe.
I'm not saying you do, but I'm just saying, like, I'm just trying to help people understand that that's what those conversations are. Those conversations aren't do everything you're doing. It's like, do all that, but also this.
Hey, tell me about where you grew up. Like,
but I wanted to say, like, I worked for a governor, former governor, right? And hearing from people, particularly in state, I mean, we took calls from people out of state, but it really mattered when people called from in state and had an issue that they really cared about. It mattered to the governor. It mattered to us as his staff. Like, it could have been one person calling in, and they might raise an issue that we hadn't even thought about.
Yep.
So that's a great point. We'll get on that. Right. But when you start hearing from a lot of people, when it's this tidal wave coming at you of people, like particularly in these Western states where it's a tidal wave of hunters coming at you saying, here's what we want to see. They take it really, really seriously. You don't have to be a big donor. You don't even have to say if you voted or not.
I think it helps to be a big donor.
You keep saying that. I'm telling you from my position is, maybe it did behind, and I didn't know about it, but it mattered. Anybody that called, it mattered. And I guess my point is, people out listening and whatnot, right? Like, picking up the phone and calling your governor's office or calling your congressional delegation, like, that matters. You can build relationships there. You can get information there, and it really can make a difference.
And it's not scary. It's an easy thing to do.
For sure.
Shockingly easy.
Cal, that's the first thing Cal does every morning when he wakes up. Lets his, is very good about letting.
Hello, Cheryl.
Yeah, is letting his elected representatives know. It's great. When I brought up, like, it was like how much it was or was not a big campaign issue in the presidential election, I was kind of getting at this idea that this might still be regarded as, with the incoming administration, new Senate, House. This still might be, this could be regarded as a fringe issue, right? Like, it could be that the jury's still out on this. Like, if you went to the Trump administration and said, love everything you're doing, but chill out about the border, you're not going to get anywhere, right? Like, that stone that's been cast, right? That was run on.
Yeah.
The issue of like, hey, you came out against this in 2015. You like verbalized opposition to divestiture of public lands in 2015. How much ever you knew enough to bring it up. You guys didn't do a bunch around that, and like we would really appreciate not having to go down this path again of talking about fewer acres to hunt and fish on.
Do you remember the Return Act?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that the act that was introduced a couple of years ago now that would have gutted Pittman-Robertson and all the money that goes into state wildlife agencies, and how hunters went apoplectic over that. And because of that, and they flooded offices of sponsors of that, and co-sponsors of that bill dropped off before the phone was hung up. They're like, oh man, I did not realize what I signed up for. Get me off of this thing. I think this has to turn into that. Like, I view this as one of those, the hunting community viewed the Pittman-Robertson Act as one of the most fundamental tenets to support the North American model is having the resources to do it, right? And not having money diverted to other purposes. It has to be the same thing in my mind, for public lands. Like, the hunters and anglers have to go apoplectic over this. So it's something that politicians just don't want to touch. Right now you have 14 states, counting Utah. You have 14 states that have said, we think the court should take a look at this. That's making it more mainstream than I want to see it.
Absolutely.
Right. And so I kind of make the analogy of, like, this should be like that Return Act. Like, this is so fundamental to who we are as a country and what we do and our livelihoods and personal endeavors and so forth.
Yeah.
Like, it's that important that it should be taken that seriously. It shouldn't be allowed to get legs It needs to stay on the fringe, and it shouldn't be allowed to get legs. So there's me making an opinion, like I came off the fence for you.
That's awesome. Good job.
From the top rope.
There's an opinion I want to clarify here too, because I just want to make sure that like I'm clear about what I'm getting at. If a state was suing, because here's a state and they said, you know what we want to do? We want to give a sort of toned down Wilderness Act protection to all BLM land. We don't think that you're protecting it enough for future generations. And we have this whole system by which we're going to take this land from you, the BLM, and we're going to create wilderness areas all over the place. I would be like, that's a great idea. I hope they win that lawsuit. To me, it's not, I should just be clear. Like, to me, it's not who has it. It's what is allowed to happen there and what is not allowed to happen there. It's like, it's not whose name is on it. It's what is the most likely path that would be that me, my kids, future generations, wildlife in perpetuity has a place to exist. Right? And it's like, I'm going to go with whatever I think is the greatest chance to create continued habitat, continued access for people to pursue outdoor activities. And I just feel like, and when I see kind of the arguments and the players, I question that. I feel that this is not moving in that. This is not going to move in that direction. I feel that this is going to move to fewer acres of wildlife habitat, fewer acres of public land for people to recreate on. It ain't gonna be good.
No. Agreed.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
We used to talk about this just all the time, right? We'd go out and lobby in DC and talk to people, and it's interesting because we have somebody who represents the nonprofit space, and then we have a business owner, entrepreneur, right? And this is something that I used to get tapped with all the time, right? It's like, hey, can you come join this fly-in to DC? Because all it is individuals and nonprofits. We need the business aspect, right? And I would go in on behalf of First Light and say, hey, we're this Idaho business. This is how many people we employ. This is, roughly how much buying and selling that we're doing, our economic impact. I'd try to frame up. Mm-hmm. And then I would tell them about our origin story on public lands. Be like, our whole thing is selling to people who have these big places to go out and push themselves. Like, we love the people that sit in box blinds. I've had a lot of fun sitting in a box blind, but the reality is you don't need this stuff. We want you to get it, but you really don't need it in a heated room on stilts, right?
Yeah.
This is how the stuff was developed. It's part of our experience by going out and trying to go deeper or push harder, get to the top of the mountain faster on public lands. That's why we developed this clothing line. This is why we keep developing this clothing line. This is how our brand is growing, by talking to people about public lands and engaging them where they want to be. And don't jeopardize this, because you're going to kill this business and you're going to kill our economic impact.
Talking their own language.
Yeah. And that is, it's pretty funny. You can see the more rooms you go into, it's like they're checking the box, right? It's like, okay, heard from the nonprofits. What else you got? Oh, what's your deal? And it's like they kind of glaze over if it's another nonprofit person. And they're like, oh, okay, that's different. What's that? And it's like, okay, got the carpenters, great. And move on, So
I think that's why maybe I take it so personally. This issue is I hunt private land. I've got a lease in Oklahoma. I like hunting private land too. So it's not like I don't hunt private land. But the ideas, I have been on, the ideas for my products, the ideas for my business have all been forged on public land. All my best ideas have happened on hunting trips on public land. It's the only place I have to think and get away from crazy world, right? I think that's like a common thing. And so just, yes, would it affect like businesses like ours, like and First Light and others? Like, absolutely. There's undeniable, but it's more than that for me. This is personal. You're talking about coming after like my sanctuary, and that's what like is so visceral for me with this issue. Because yes, those are all true, but I think people tend to even like tune out the business argument. They're like, how many billions of dollars are recreation, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I don't care. You know, I care about that, but ultimately what I really care about is like, you're coming after my home, and that pisses me off, right?
Yeah.
So you're coming after the thing that I really care about. I can deal with losing money. I can't deal with losing my home, and neither can my kids. So like, just keep your damn hands off of it.
That's the thing when public land defenders, when wildlife habitat defenders go down the path of talking about money.
Yeah.
I always am like I'll let them do it. If they win, I let them do it. But I'm always like a little bit like, man, I would be careful. You're treading in some dangerous territory, because are you telling me that if wildlife didn't make financial sense, you wouldn't want it around anymore?
Right.
Like, watch the language, man, because you could tell me that wildlife costs money, and I'd be like, okay,
Get out the checkbook.
like whatever.
Yeah.
Doesn't change my mind about it. So I'm always like a little bit like, hey, you know, tread a little lightly about this whole financial thing.
Yeah, it's emotional. Right? It should be emotional.
Yeah,
right?
because if someone said to me, it wouldn't take very long for them to convince me. They'd be like, you know, those kids of yours are costing you a lot of money. I would be like, oh, shit. All right. Take them away.
I think
Never looked at it like that.
I mean, I think you said it. Like, what? Everything doesn't have to justify itself economically to exist in this world, right? And yeah, that's why I feel about.
No, still got your convertible. I mean, not yours, but.
I mean, I'd love that. I'd love to have one, right?
Brat's Miata.
Chrysler Sebring.
Could you imagine that hunting rig? That'd be amazing.
That would be sweet.
Guys, I'm going to bring something full circle. I'm going to give you a chance, but we started out this show talking about the podcast trivia.
Uh-huh.
And then we got a bunch of kids coming in here in a minute to record our kids' trivia tournament for our kids' podcast. So we're going to wrap it up in a minute, but I want to give you guys a chance to have we used to do a thing in the old days where you get a closing thought.
The long
I remember
ago.
that. I remember that too.
Yeah. And I'd like to extend that courtesy to you guys in our waning minutes here. If you have a closing thought, and if you could, within that closing thought, someone could have the also do like a little bit of here's how to follow along with what's going to happen with this whole thing.
You want me to go first, or what?
Yeah, I already did mine. Mine was the one I was talking all about how. When I was talking all about how
Everybody
you can
got
vote,
teary-eyed.
You can vote for a party and then go say, "But dude, chill out about this public lands deal."
I think I've already said mine. This is personal. Should be personal for you. Stay vigilant. And if I may, I think there's an open question around whether or not Guy Fieri is the mayor of Flavortown.
I was going to go back to Flavortown with my closing thought.
Well, Randall, you should have gone
I was
first.
going to do
This
what
is a
Steve did and said-
Flavortown issue.
I think
okay?
my closing thought I said at the very outset of this, which is we know Guy Fieri is the mayor of Flavortown.
I don't know. I think we might have some hanging chads in that vote.
Bush v. Gore, another original cert.
It went right. That went right to the Supreme Court. Yeah.
Well, I made a reference to that you didn't catch. I said, "Who's the president?"
Oh no, I caught that.
Why are you going back and redoing my line?
Well,
Because you're just doing it for all the people that didn't catch it?
yeah.
he-
You're
for
trying
the
to take
people.
credit.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's been a while since Bush v. Gore.
Yeah, okay.
Plus, I wanted to show that I could think of another.
Yeah, can I share a Bush v. Gore? Can I share a quick Bush v. Gore story? We were going on a hunting trip. This is before, like, you couldn't, no in reaches and stuff. Okay, whatever the hell year that was. And we're going on a hunting trip, and we're like, everybody's like, okay, well, as soon as the election, everyone wanted to see the election because we're going sometime around that window. So the morning after the election, we're going on a long trip in the backcountry. And we're like, damn, how could it be that you don't know who the president is? And there's no way to talk to anybody for 4 or 5 days. And then, like, the whole time we're just dying to go find out and come back, be like, they still don't know. We didn't miss anything after all.
All right, so
Mr. Hot Take himself.
I'm gonna have another hot take.
Hello?
I feel like now I'm just
2 in one day.
Just
Oh,
getting all-
Just
yeah,
numbered
just
up.
loosening
Have a
up
drink.
That should be the thing with Dave. We have David, and he has to give an opinion and take a shot. Just keep going.
just see where we are an hour
Just
and a half.
until he's just try to get him to pound the table.
We'll solve the world's problems.
If toward the end of the night he pounds the table, we'll know he won.
So I guess my closing thought is a thought and then a hot take, and then you said where you can
Yeah, how do you
find out
how do you pay attention?
How do you pay
to this?
attention?
Like,
yeah. So the thing I'd say is apathy is not an option. Like apathy and thinking this is just going to go away. Saying this is just a fringe issue. This lawsuit doesn't really have any merit. It's going to go away. When you take that position, you wind up in a spot where bad things happen.
Okay.
Right. And so, I think it's incumbent upon everybody to really be vigilant and diligent. And I go back to this, you have to be in touch with your delegation. You have to be in touch with your governor's office. You have to be in touch with, if you're supporting, a nonprofit like mine or other nonprofits out there, be in touch with them. Let people know this matters to me. And I want you to be engaged in this to make sure that our public lands aren't sold or transferred. Because if you just take the position of, we've been through this before, this might be the last time you have to go through it, right? And you might not like the outcome. So that's sort of my, I would call that my plea to people. You asked me before, what do I think the likelihood of success on the merits is? I don't know. I think there's a strong argument that the property clause, and we never talked about it, but the property clause of the Constitution gives the federal government the authority to manage lands in perpetuity. I think there's a very, very strong argument to be made there. There's some lower case law that supports that interpretation. There's some dicta in some U.S. Supreme Court cases that support that interpretation. So I think there's a path to victory to protect public lands in the legal context, but it's not a foregone conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be diligent on the political side too, because there are going to be efforts to strip things away and to transfer and all those things. So do that. Here's my little bit of hyperbole, or because I'll have one. I analogize this to, this is going to age me a little bit. Remember that movie Ocean's 11?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Never saw it, but yeah, I'm familiar.
What were they?
I'd like to see it.
You never saw it? What were they?
They're thieves.
Right. But they were super sophisticated, creative thieves, right? They were
Professional thieves.
charismatic,
Yeah.
professional,
Yeah, you sat
really
on the
invested
side
in
with
it,
them, yep.
right? And here's where it comes. Like, I'm just going to call this like halt the heist. That's kind of what this is. This feels like a really sophisticated heist of our public lands. Maybe that's as hyperbolic as I can get.
No, I'm following.
I can see that.
And I also remember Ocean's 12, Ocean's 13. I mean, there are some other parallels we could draw.
They're going to come and get it.
I think it's well founded.
Right. And so I say that to say, and this will be the total selfish plug here. Like, if you want to follow more and learn more about what my organization, National Wildlife Federation, is doing, you can just go to nwf.org/halt the heist. And
You've already made it.
we've already made it.
There you go.
And,
Good job.
and
That's good.
all kinds of resources will be there for you.
Halt the heist.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I already trademarked that before you said it, though. So
That's
Today.
weird.
yeah,
I
I'm
looked
sorry
it
about
up
that.
yesterday.
Yeah,
He's a
well,
lawyer.
I'm sorry, man. Yeah,
He is a lawyer.
I'm the business guy. over
Was there
here, so,
another
yeah.
phrase that gave you the inspiration for that? It's on the tip of my
Halt the
tongue.
heist. He's like, there's some little
There's some-
alliteration going
there's-
on.
Yeah, there's some parallels you could draw, but
Sure.
if you
Yeah,
wanted to go
yeah.
that
Halt
way.
the heist.
Yeah, so that's my.
I'll sell it to you, though. I'll sell you the rest.
I don't know how you. Did your brother say something?
Listen, I don't want to disclose my methods, but I'm just offering to sell it to you. That's what I'm saying.
It's not worth anything right now.
No, it is now.
Now
It's
it's-
on
now
top.
it's worth
Yeah,
it.
like,
Now
this
it's
thing
worth it.
rolls
Yeah.
out.
we were joking the other day because I came up with a slogan, but I didn't have an organization for it. And it was today's children are tomorrow's enemies.
Yeah.
And then it just came to me at dinner with my wife. And I thought
And that sounds like something she would have been really on board with.
and I was like, what organization could use that slogan? And then my friend Savannah said it could be one of those book burning One of those book banning organizations could use that slogan. They're kids now, but they'll read these books and they'll be enemies tomorrow. Well, thanks guys for coming on, man. Oh, and to follow it, give the URL again.
Oh yeah, nwf.org/halt the heist.
All right, thanks. Brad Brooks, Dave Willms, thanks for coming out, man. Men.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Heat wave on a westerly wind. That old trail's made of dust again. Heat wave goodbye to the sin. That old tin man would only rust again. Gate was open to the light. After 40 long years, that's the first time he forgot. He never forgets. He'll always remember times when the rains fell and thunder would tremor. Where are all the thunderstorms used to help us hold home? Where's my country symphony? That old tin roof used to play for me. Roosters used to fill the fields, flushing cubbies that the brush concealed. Gone just the troughs can't stay filled. Walk for miles a day, not a single bird or bill. He still mentions 82. Every year before when the walls of white silk